ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to DAO Talk Weekly. This is DAO Talk Weekly, episode number 40, big number 40. This is your one-stop shop for everything DAOs. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Frisian.
Welcome back, my friend. How are you? How's the week? What have you been up to? What's your general state of mind? Let the people know.
I'm good, man. Very, very busy. Delegation week is coming up next week. It's popping. I got more DMs than I can answer. I'm like, I'm sorry. I will get to your DM. I promise. You know? Plus, I deal with my anxiety by just tweeting a lot. So I always feel bad because I'm like, I didn't respond to your DM, but I'm just tweeting absurd things. But it's like, that's how I'm coping, okay? It's all right. I'll get to your DM in a second.
That's how I am too. I'm like, oh, I feel bad when I don't answer these DMs, and then I'm like tweeting a bunch. I'm like, wow, it's two separate things, right?
It's two separate things, okay? It might be completely irrational, but I need you to accept it.
I think most people operate under that same assumption. So that's I'm like, okay, it's okay. Because I'm okay if people take a while to get back to me on DMs, and then I see them tweeting. I'm like, yeah, it's just the way we operate. So it is what it is. You're drowning in DMs, suffering from success. Frisian story this week, DJ Khaled. But yeah.
More DMs, more problems.
It's a good problem to have. Well, we got a lot to cover this week in a short amount of time. As always, we're going to get you in and out as fast as possible, get you the weekly DAO news. As Frisian mentioned, Delegation Week is kind of dominating, I would say, the DAO ecosystem this week and next. It's happening next week, but PR and all the big DAOs are starting to ramp up promotions around Delegation Week. But before we get into Delegation Week, let's talk DAO revenue. We have a few tweets here lined up to talk DAO revenue. Frisian, first one's from GFX Labs, our friends at GFX Labs, who have been on the pod. DAO Talk interview early on, like maybe in the single digits with Getty, who runs GFX Labs. They tweeted, "It's time to turn on the fee switch at Uniswap. Let's see what this means." The fee switch is a hot topic in the Uniswap community. It has been for as long as I can remember. I feel like since I got in 2021, the fee switch debate, debacle, whatever you want to call it, at Uniswap has been front and center. So, Frisian, break it down. Why is it important, and why is GFX here tweeting about it?
Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit last week, but I just want to expand on the theme of the fees of like the Uniswap fee switch and also just DAO revenue in general a little bit. I think that is, I would say, like, if I were to sort of stack rank the most relevant issues in DAOs today, revenue is easily near the top. I think there was a while, like, if we were to rewind to say last cycle, I think there wasn't an expectation that DAOs generated revenue necessarily. Like, I mean, I think people knew it would be good if they did, but like none of the DAOs did generate revenue. There were DAOs that said they generated revenue, but really it was just more token issuance, right? I'm talking about like an actual business model where like customers are paying for things and their revenue for that is going into the DAO. But I think we're starting to see a big kind of shift there, a paradigm shift where, at least for DAOs where, they're sort of aspiring to be large and have staying power in the ecosystem. I think we're shifting towards having an expectation that they have some sort of ongoing sustainable revenue going into the treasury. And so, this has long been a discussion at Uniswap, but I think it's kind of reaching like a boiling point. This proposal from GFX is very cool. The whole design space around the Uniswap fee switch and like how you sort of implement fee capture and revenue for Uniswap is extremely interesting. It's a lot more nuanced than you would think, right? Just from the outside, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll turn on a fee switch. But like with the way that like pools and the permissionless kind of the permissionless AMM design works, and also with like regulatory considerations, right? And trying to sort of maximize the decentralization and minimize or completely eliminate the extent to which like fees would sort of like somehow be collected by like an individual party on any level. It's actually like quite nuanced how you design this, right? And this proposal from GFX is definitely recommended reading. GFX is, they've been working on Uniswap for a long time, been working on DeFi since day one, been working in like governor DAOs since day one in the compound ecosystem. So they know what they're doing. And yeah, definitely worth reading. I think we're going to see more similar proposals, iterations of this proposal. And this is going to be like an ongoing, very active discussion for months to come. So we saw this in Uniswap, but we're seeing it in other DAOs too. So we talked about this, but yeah, speaking of another DAO that has the potential to generate revenue for the treasury is Lido. So Lido is the largest liquid staking protocol, and they're sort of, especially with withdrawals being enabled, which went live this week for Lido, they sort of like have a profitable protocol. And so we're starting to see community proposals go live to like redirect those funds into the treasury, and then even kind of the next level of that, which is like implement a rev share where you can somehow stake your Lido tokens and then receive allocation of that treasury. So Lido is another good example, right? Like there's kind of like an emerging set of like actual businesses that exist, right? Like where it's like they have real users, they have a profitable operation, and Lido, Uniswap, and then Arbitrum, which is the third one we're going to talk about, are all great examples of that. Where sort of like if you look at how people are using the protocol, like there's a pretty clear potential to generate 9 figures of revenue, so hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue on an ongoing basis. And so we're going to see it play out in these DAOs, right? Like all 3 of these are on-chain DAOs. Uniswap, Lido, and Arbitrum are all on-chain DAOs. Lido uses Aragon, so they don't use Governor, but it is like an on-chain implementation of governance. I'm not like deeply familiar with it, but I'm pretty sure it's on-chain. And so it's going to be absolutely fascinating. Like it's going to be really cool to see this like conversation about like how sort of like token holders can capture the upside of the protocol while continuing to be aligned on future growth, and also ensure decentralization, particularly from a regulatory perspective, is going to be absolutely fascinating. Arbitrum, same thing. Arbitrum is kind of like the farthest along in a lot of ways, in my opinion, because they already put all the revenue from the sequencer into the DAO, and it can be like permissionlessly controlled by the DAO. So they also like, I think, probably generate the most revenue. It depends what historical period you want to use to sort of like make future assumptions about revenue, but certainly over the last month or two, they've been generating a lot of revenue. And so now the community is kind of driving a discussion around, okay, we are generating this revenue, like what if we redistribute it to token holders, right? And so this is where the question of like future growth versus immediate profit capture comes into question. So high growth software businesses like Arbitrum that are in a very competitive space, they don't usually issue, like in the centralized company world, right? They usually don't issue like dividends to shareholders this early on in their life cycle. They're redeploying that capital into growing the protocol, right? And so, as an Arbitrum delegate, like I probably would favor proposals that really kind of take that revenue that the DAO is generating and try to reinvest it to continue to grow, versus like some kind of revenue, some kind of like profit issuance to token holders. But we'll see. It'll be a really fun discussion across all these protocols, and it's one that, like, as someone who really wants to see the ecosystem mature and wants to figure out how these protocols and DAOs can become self-sustaining entities, I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on this take. Revenue's good. DAO should be making revenue, but I think this tweet kind of, maybe we can dive in a little bit here. If you're not watching their tweet, is basically the goal here is to drum up. This is around the there's this tweet around arbitrum revenue sharing, which is very like engagement farmy. It's a super jack guy holding up a sign that says arb revenue sharing from SciTweak. Is that how you pronounce his name? SciTweak? Is that the Twitter account?
I have no idea. This is just like a. I have no idea who this person is. Like, this is DAO. This is like DAO land, right? It's not like the Arbitrum Foundation made this proposal. Like, this is literally just a CT member Arbitrum user. Like, Arbitrum has a lot of users, man. Like, from all around the world. Like, you know. So yeah, it's just a random Arbitrum user, governor, CT member.
Well, yeah, the point I'm trying to make here is like this tweet. Basically, the goal here is to drum up some attention, create an account on the governance forum, provide feedback, and get involved. We don't want to end up frozen and unable to coordinate around a fee switch like uni holders. Kind of mentioned that earlier when I was describing it. Like, yeah, it feels like Uniswap's been frozen around, or uni holders have been frozen around this debate around the fee switch, and nothing has gotten done. And by default, that means no fee switch gets turned on. And you would know better than me since you are a very large Arbitrum delegate and pretty heavily involved in Arbitrum. But do you feel like the governance participation, and this will go right in delegation week because it's a similar vein. Like, do you feel like the Arbitrum like governance community is heading in the right direction? Do you think there's work to be done? And I'm not saying Uniswap's community is bad per se, but around something as large as the fee switch, which has been a contentious debate for literally over a year. Do you foresee this happening in the Arbitrum DAO? I know that's like a very I know you can't see the future, but like, what is your take on the state of Arbitrum's DAO and their governance community, and then in them in relation to others, and like what people can learn from that? And we'll go right into delegation week from there.
Yeah, the Arbitrum DAO is very early. So far, there have not been any on-chain proposals. There's just been like a social signaling on 3 proposals, which are really just trying to establish the constitution of the DAO and then, approve the existence of the Arbitrum Foundation. There's a ton of drama around those, but I actually am very bullish on where it landed, where sort of like the community pushed back against some things they didn't like in the first proposal, and it got revised into 2 follow-up proposals that like I thought were very fair, and then those got roundly approved, right? Like they got social signaled, like passed via social signaling, or like approved via social signaling at like a very high rate. And so yeah, very early, but off to a good start. But yeah, we'll see. Like, the Arbitrum delegate mix is very uncorrelated to like any other on-chain DAO. Like, there's some overlap with like Hop, because there's a lot of I think Arbitrum is sort of the biggest like network within Hop, and so like Olympio is a huge delegate in Hop and also in the Arbitrum DAO. But if you just look at the top 10 Arbitrum delegates, like most of them aren't really major delegates in any other protocol. And so yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Like the biggest delegate is a DAO in Arbitrum, called Treasure DAO, which is sort of like one of the most popular protocols, teams in the Arbitrum ecosystem. Like, I don't know how they're gonna vote. It's it's gonna be really, really interesting going forward.
Yeah, it definitely seems though like the more we progress in the space, the better. Like earlier on, I mean, obviously I feel like this is healthy growth, but like things are becoming healthier and people are becoming more involved earlier on. I don't know if that's a product of just Arbitrum being as massive as it is, or if it's just a symptom of the space growing and progressing, or maybe it's a little bit of both. But I think it's pretty exciting to see, and I think this will take us right into delegation week, which is this topic is something we're thinking a lot about and building a lot around, and we love it so much and are so involved in it that we have created an entire week of events around delegation, whether that be for you, a big DAO, if you are a big DAO listening to this, whether you are a token holder who thinks they're too small to really participate in anything but wants to get involved, we have stuff for you. And then we also have stuff for the big delegates, the whales and the smaller delegates alike. Frisian, how are you feeling around delegation week? We'll get into the little bit of the weeds of like what we have planned towards the end of this, but we're about 2 or 3 days away from the start of delegation week. If you're listening to this over the weekend, it's probably starting either tomorrow or in 2 days. How are you feeling? Feeling good?
Yeah, I feel good. It's kind of like an event, except for it's like a digital event that's taking place over an entire week. And anytime that I've organized an event, like at this point, I'm always just like completely overwhelmed. You kind of reach this point where like the number of concurrent threads is actually more than like a human can sort of process. But so it feels scary, but it usually ends up really well. So yeah, I feel good. I feel good about where we are, even though I'm personally overwhelmed right at this exact moment. I think it's going to be, a very successful and engaging week where lots of people, lots of token holders look at who their tokens are delegated to or not delegated to, and then re-engage with that decision and make a delegation.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like the backbone of the entire week in terms of like the event schedule. We're going to have a bunch of Twitter spaces. I think we're going to have at least 10, maybe more as time progresses. And I can just kind of run through the schedule. So we're going to have 5 Twitter spaces a day that are panels that are, your traditional Twitter spaces, multiple people, maybe not debating, but going back and forth, having a stimulating conversation around different topics in the delegation space. Those will all happen at the same time every day, one a day across all of next week. So we're starting off on Monday with an intro to delegation space, which will just kind of cover everything in regards to delegation, kind of set the tone for the week with some amazing guests on that. If you are unsure about delegation or just want to learn more about delegation week and how to get involved, that is the perfect space to start. Tuesday, we have a collaboration with DAO Research Collective, DRC, who has been on this podcast many times. They are releasing an amazing research report on the state of delegation. So they will cover that, and they will have some guests from some large DAOs, including like Uniswap and Optimism, to talk delegation. Wednesday, we have the one I'm most interested in is open sourcing delegate data, keeping the entire space open, allowing users to source, who they want to delegate to, and make a more informed decision. That's something we think a lot about at Tally, and the product we will be like pushing that next week, like Frisian just mentioned, about making the right decision, maybe redelegating your token. That will be the space for you. Thursday, responsibilities of the token holder, something that I don't think is talked about enough. As me, kind of representing, in my opinion, the smaller token holder, I've been saying that over the past couple of weeks, this is probably going to be the one that's most important to the stakeholder like myself or like you, if you are just your average token holder. And then Friday, we'll have a collaboration with the USC Blockchain Club. We had Chase on the podcast a few weeks ago, who is a Giga Chad young king, doing amazing governance work for the USC Blockchain Club. That is USC in Southern California. So him and friends will join us for that day. And then throughout the week, after all those spaces, which are happening at 11 a.m. Eastern, we'll have a little bit of a break, and then we will have a DAO spotlight for all of the DAOs that are offering gasless delegation. Frisian, I'm going to have you break down gasless delegation in a second, but we'll have a shorter space, but more focused space around each of those big DAOs, like think Gitcoin, Uniswap, and others, that will cover what they're doing, what their delegate ecosystem is like, how you can get involved. So we'll have a full schedule out. If you're listening to this on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, the schedule is out on delegationweek.com. And if you need to get any updates around everything that's happening, go to tallyxyz on Twitter. We're tweeting out everything from our end and everything from all of our participants as well. So, Frisian, that was a lot, but tell the people about gasless delegation and why. The panels are pretty self-explanatory in and of themselves. But what about those DAO spotlight spaces? What about gasless delegation? Should the people care about?
All right, so first of all, we don't need to acknowledge that there's another USC than the one in California. I assume you're talking about Little Carolina, when you mentioned about the other one, but just want to clarify on that. Outside of that, delegation is kind of expensive right now. It'd be costing like $15 to delegate in a mainnet DAO. So we're partnering with some of the larger DAOs on Tally, and even some of the just other DAOs on Tally to sponsor. The DAOs are sponsoring delegation transactions, and then Tally is relaying them for free on the user's behalf. So those DAOs include Arbitrum, who's doing it even though it's cheaper there, it's still like $1 or $2, I think, right now to do a delegation transaction, maybe $1, something like that on Arbitrum. So they're sponsoring delegation transactions. Uniswap, ENS, Gitcoin, and Pool together are all sponsoring their transactions. And then Hop is doing something a little different where they've created like a delegation incentive pool of Hop tokens. And if you delegate during delegation week, they'll issue you sort of like a reward. And it's designed to sort of like, relatively speaking, reward, smaller holders on delegation. So Hop's doing some really cool stuff there too. And so, during delegation week, May 22nd next week through May 26th, in those DAOs, you should be able to do one delegation transaction for free as long as you held the governance token in your wallet prior to May 1st. So if you don't make that cutoff, sorry, we're just trying to prevent aggressive sibling of this, because that's the way of the road in Web3. Gasless delegation is a thing in some of these DAOs next week, which is going to be really great because, like, honestly, $15 is a lot to pay to delegate, like, for real. So pumped for that.
Yeah, man, I'm getting super pumped. I mean, this is how we do with all of the events we plan. I feel like on DAO Talk, towards the end of the episode, if people listen, we're always like ranting or venting about event planning at the end. But like, I always forget, like, when you get close to it and the work's been done, it's just exciting. Like, I'm really excited to, we still got to get across the finish line, but the community's getting hype about it. The spaces are going to be amazing. It's important to remember, like, this space, even though it can get crazy and weird, it's full of like absolutely amazing people and minds. And this week is going to kind of collect everyone in one space for a week and highlight the amazing work that's being done, and then talking about the future and what we can build moving forward. So I'm super excited about it. I'm excited to see everyone, talk to everyone, slide into our DMs, even though they are overloaded right now. Maybe not Frisian's, maybe mine. If you want to get a quicker response, slide into mine or put us in a group. As always, you can still get involved in delegation week. We have a large Telegram group with all the participants just talking shop around governance and how we're going to make this week awesome for the community. So keep a lookout for that in the future. Frisian, anything else people need to know about DW before we sign off one last time?
No, let's get it. Everybody should be delegating. If you have gasless, well, okay, I'll go on a little rant. The DAO Research Collective is putting out a big report about delegation for delegation week, and I did like an interview for it, and I mostly focused on this concept of re-elections, and we had like a fun conversation about this on the Hop community call actually earlier this week. Shout out the Hop community, shout out Dipsy, shout out Chris, shout out Kenny, shout out Max. Probably missing someone. Sorry, Shane. Good crew over there. But yeah, anyway, it's like we were talking about whether there should be mandatory re-elections or delegation. That can be like hard to implement on chain, but I think delegates should have terms, right? And then you should have to be re-elected. And that's like, we see that sort of like empirical evidence for this in the way that governance participation decays over time in these DAOs. It's like delegates shouldn't serve forever, right? And if they are going to serve forever, they should be like, they should have to be sort of re-elected, right, on a given period. And so, delegation week in many ways is like an early proto attempt at like DAO re-election season, right? And so, today it's not necessary to do this, but you could imagine a world where, if there's gasless delegation, right, even if you're already delegated someone, you undelegate and redelegate, right, to like express your sort of like support for your delegation continuing to be with that person. Probably don't need to do that right now, although you can, if you have a gasless delegation transaction. But like, I think, yeah, just take the opportunity if you're a token holder, right? Like, just take a quick peek on Tally. Like, have they been voting? Do you agree with what they're voting for? Because I think, yeah, that's like, if I were to outline like the biggest challenge we have in DAOs, at the most fundamental layer, it's like driving that feedback loop between token holders and delegates, right? Making sure that those delegates are accountable to and representing the interests of the people who their tokens are delegated to. So shout out to token holders. Looking forward to everyone's participation in Delegation Week.
Yeah, that's a great point. Really puts it in perspective. Like, we're kind of in the beginning stages of like building this new paradigm. So like, if you're still listening to this, like, yeah, just go fucking get involved. Go do something. Go build. That's the best thing you can do. And we're making it pretty easy for you with delegation. Like, there's no shortage of opportunity to get involved, can build, and we're excited to continue to do that. So, I mean, that's something we've been talking about since episode 1. This is episode 40. So go look back, check the receipts. But yeah, it's been another great episode of DAO Talk Weekly. As always, go subscribe to the written format of both DAO Talk Weekly and the Tally newsletter. That's daotalk.substack.com, tally.newsletter.xyz. Those will be linked in the show notes. We always link all of the tweets and everything we talk about in the show notes as well. Frisian, it's been an honor. I will see you next week. Actually, maybe not next week because of Delegation Week. I will see you in 2 weeks. It's been an honor. Peace.
Peace.